Guys, I've realised that I've been sharing the how in relation to my weight loss and health transformation without fully sharing the why and getting underneath the reasons why I'd gained weight. And I'm going to address it in this video today, because the truth is the physical weight of 12.5 stone, which is what I've lost to date, didn't come off until first I dropped the emotional weight of my past. And today in this video I'm going to share the impact of having grown up as a Jehovah's Witness, but also what that did to my psyche that caused my weight gain, and how I had to address that and drop that emotionally before I could start tackling the physical weight that I'd gained over the years. Now I'm going to give a little trigger warning before we delve into this, because I am going to be touching on mental and emotional issues, but also the Jehovah's Witness blood doctrine. So yeah, just look after yourself. You may be a current Jehovah's Witness or an ex-Jehovah's Witness, or just somebody interested in the Jehovah's Witness story, but also in my own health and weight loss journey. So yeah, just look after yourself as I go through some of these issues today. Now, being a weight loss coach, I know that weight issues for some people, in fact I'd say for a fair amount of people, isn't just about what we eat, and it isn't about how much we eat over a protracted period of time. It's often much more deeply rooted than that. It's often psychological, mental and emotional. And I can speak to that because, as I say, I've lost 12.5 stone in weight, and I didn't realise just how deeply rooted my weight issue was. And it's almost like the food and the drink is very surface level, and there was much deeper issues. And until I started to address those deeper issues, you know, I was in and out of weight loss clubs. I've done Weight Watchers, Slimming World, I've done calorie counting, macros, keto, carnivore, so many different things. But until I started to address the emotional and the mental issues associated with my past, I couldn't get past any of those things. And the weight, I would lose weight, but it would go back on because I hadn't addressed those issues. And I've now, as I'm working on those deep-rooted issues, I've been able to lose 12 stones, and other than gaining the odd pound or two here and there, I've not regained my weight. So when I started to address those underlying deep-rooted issues, then weight loss started to become easier. And today I'm going to share with you some really deep and also personal and deeply uncomfortable truths about where my problem with food and drink and also weight started. And I'm also going to share with you some of those issues related to the Jehovah's Witness blood doctrine and mental health support. It is going to be uncomfortable for me, but I'm sharing it because it may help you as we enter this new year. It may help you. So stay with me, guys, and if any of this resonates with you, then do feel free to drop a comment below. 7 years ago, I found myself in a situation where I was physically exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained. I was in pain, constantly in pain every single day. I was unable to move. Every joint in my body was painful and swollen. I struggled to get out of bed, and at one point I just saw a future of being bedbound. I was so bad. I struggled to get in and out of bed, up and down the stairs, in and out of the bath or the shower. I needed help for absolutely everything. My body was going absolutely haywire. I felt really, really low mentally and emotionally. I had no energy. I was drained, and daily life was one big, massive blur. I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and it didn't fit me anymore. I was extremely obese, very, very obese. On the 8th of January 2019, I decided that I was going to do something about how I was feeling, about the physical damage that I'd done to my body. I was so overweight, so obese. I was looking at a death sentence. So on the 8th of January 2019, I decided no, I'm dealing with this for the last time. And I'm really pleased and really proud of myself to tell you that I've lost over £180 to date, which is well over 12.5 stone or 80 kg. I'm really proud of myself for that. I'm physically lighter, and my diabetes is so much better controlled. And I'm also addressing the mental, emotional and psychological damage. Now that's how my story is today. However, let's dive in and I'll tell you where it all started. I was always overweight as a child. I was I was the plump baby, the plump toddler. But I didn't lose that puppy fat. I then became the overweight child, teenager, and then the obese adult. And until I started having therapy about 2 years ago, didn't really make the connection to obesity in childhood. Now, I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and some of my earliest memories is being on that monotonous treadmill, that routine of preparing for meetings and going to meetings. And Jehovah's Witnesses call their church or church services meetings. So I was constantly preparing for them and then going to them. And it was 5 meetings a week. We went Sunday. The routine was on Monday night, we would prepare for Tuesday meeting. On Tuesday, we would go to the meeting. Then on Wednesday, we would prepare for the Thursday meeting. On Thursday, we would go to the meeting. On Friday, we would prepare to go out in field service. On Saturday, we would go out in field service. Then on Saturday night, we would prepare for the Sunday meeting. And then on Sunday, we would go to Sunday meeting. And then it would start all over again. And as a child, you were part of that. There was no free ticket. Being a child, I was part of that, and that was how my childhood was growing up. And when I was out in field service, I was there all weathers, whether it was the sun was shining, whether it was raining, whether it was blowing a gale, we were out in all weathers. And we were knocking people's doors, disturbing people on Saturday and Sunday mornings, when all they wanted to do was be at home with their families. Kids were watching cartoons or watching TV, in the warmth, comfortable, being relaxed. And there I was as a child, as a young teenager, knocking people's doors and trying to convert them to a religion that they just weren't interested in. Not only was that a factor for me, but also I was under constant scrutiny. Scrutiny around what I wore. Yeah, was my skirt at the right length? Was my top at the right length? The colour of my hair, my haircut, my hairstyles, the jewellery that I wore. I remember once being pulled up by an elder because I had a brooch and it looked like a cross. And after the meeting, they'd spotted this in the meeting, and I was under scrutiny. I was pulled aside. I must have been about 14 at the time, pulled across and asked what that was and why I was wearing it, and had to explain myself, because they thought it was a cross. It wasn't a cross. I wouldn't have worn a cross because of the mind conditioning. Wouldn't have worn that. But yeah, from a distance, he thought it was a cross. I was under scrutiny for that. I was under scrutiny around what I read, what I watched. There were certain TV programmes I couldn't watch, who I associated with at school, who I hung around with, whether I went into the assemblies and sang hymns, whether I celebrated somebody's birthday or Christmas. The scrutiny was just endless. It was endless. And if it wasn't me parents or my mother particularly monitoring me, I was under scrutiny by the elders, and if there was anything I could get away with, I was always reminded that God was watching me at all times. He was watching me, and he knows. All of this and so much more was just too much for my body, my nervous system. The stress that caused in me was phenomenal, and unknown to me, it took residence in my body, in my nervous system, only for it to rear its head over the coming years. Now, if that wasn't enough, then I was living with the threat of the impending Armageddon, this massive doomsday that I was taught about, where God was going to destroy all wicked people, essentially people who didn't believe in him, who didn't worship him, and who wasn't active Jehovah's Witnesses. And he was going to destroy them, kill them, and the only people that were going to survive was good Jehovah's Witnesses. So the pressure was on for me to be a good Jehovah's Witness, because I didn't want to die. So I had to go out, I had to preach, I had to teach, I had to, take this message to other people and essentially save them. And if I didn't do that, then not only would I be shunned and potentially disfellowshipped and cut off from all my loved ones, but I had a couple of fireballs with my name on it that were going to come and strike me dead at Armageddon, and then the birds were going to come and eat my rotting corpse. I ain't joking, guys. I ain't joking. This is what I was living with and growing up with. And my main coping mechanism to deal with all of that trauma was food. Food was my vice. And lots of Jehovah's Witnesses have their vice. For a lot of people, it's alcohol. And alcohol is a massive, massive problem in the Jehovah's Witness community. Huge. And, I'm not here to shame anybody, really not. but I'm just sharing my memories of, and I remember in particular one brother, he would be always at the meetings drunk, always. And you know, we would see him roll, because there was a pub not far from our Kingdom Hall, and we would see him roll out of the pub, stagger down to the Kingdom Hall. After the meetings, he would stagger back up the road and back into the pub. And that was not uncommon. Not uncommon. So alcohol was a vice for a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. Then there was all those secret smokers, people who had taken to smoking as a way of dealing with all of this doom and gloom. Then you had all those people who were addicted to porn. And then now we're going into other territories, because you only have to look on the internet and type in Jehovah's Witnesses CSA, and you will see the Australian Royal Commission and all of that. It's a massive, massive, massive problem. And then there's gambling as well. Gambling, another massive vice. So lots of Jehovah's Witnesses had their vice. And mine was food. Mine was food. And it wasn't, you know, as with everything, it's not, you know, the salads or the protein. It was all those foods that were not healthy, that were not good for me. I would eat lots of sugary, carby things, you know, lots of crisps and biscuits and cakes and donuts and sweets and toffees, all of that I would be eating. And I would stuff them down. Because that I would stuff down with those foods all of those feelings of that impending doomsday, that destruction, the feeling that I was never good enough. Yeah, all of those feelings I would be stuffing down with food, trying to stay on the right side of life so that I can survive this doomsday, this impending Armageddon that was going to happen any time, any day now. I did a video the other day where I was talking about I didn't think I was going to live till my eighth birthday in 1975. And all of that was part of it. I had to survive to 1975 when I would be 8. And I didn't think I would. And that's where this problem started stuffing food down. I was a massive secret eater at home. Gosh, you know, honestly, my mother used to cook like sandwiches for my dad, and I used to be always in and out of the kitchen nibbling. She used to like cook bacon for him, and I remember my dad used to say, "Who's been at my bacon? I've come down and there's virtually nothing left." Oh God, I could never admit to it, but it was me. I'd secretly be eating, you know. I'd be eating, coming home from school and making sugar sandwiches, getting bread, putting loads of butter on it, sprinkling tons of sugar on it, and just eating it. And my mum used to go, "We had a loaf of bread last night. Where's it? Oh, gone, there's only 2 slices left." I would never admit it. It was me. Secretly eating, stuffing all of these feelings down. It was terrible. It was really bad. And, you know, my mum used to pick and mix sweets from Woolworths. I don't know if anybody remembers Woolworths. And I remember I used to just beg and cry for this pick and mix. And my mum used to go, "You're just having one," because by this time I was a big child. She was like, "You're having one." And I remember, I've told this story a couple of times here on my channel when I was talking about my weight. And I remember thinking, when I am old enough to get a job and work, I'm going to go to Woolworths, I'm going to buy the biggest bag of pick and mix, and I'm going to eat the lot. And that's where I know I've got a lot of regular viewers. If you remember me telling you that story, you'll know where it's come from now. It's come from that, trying to push down all of these feelings around death and Armageddon and fireballs and destructions and being killed and then being left to rot in the streets and then eaten by, but it was a lot. It was a lot. Now, as I got older and I was out in field service, knocking the doors, I couldn't wait for the hour or the 2 hours to be up, or for us to finish the street or whatever it was we were working, because on the way home I was going to stop off at a cake shop and I was going to buy 2 cakes. It was always 2, because I figured that if I bought 1, the assistant would know it's for me. So I would always buy 2, because then I could make out that it's for me and my sister, or me and my mum, or me and my friend who was waiting around the corner. I would always buy 2. I look back now, I just can't believe the things I did. And then I would eat it on my way home. And I would always, I'd always wait until I was on my own. Even if I had to walk back, I'd always wait until I was on my own to go into the cake shop and buy these cakes. And usually it was like sugary donuts, or, slices, or, sticky buns. It was always something like that. And always 2. And I would stuff them in my mouth and eat them before I got home. And I'll never forget. Gosh, this has happened over 40 years ago, and the shame of it still burns me today, even today. As I was going home this one day, I'll never forget, it was an evening, and I was going home, and I popped into this, I can still remember this cake shop. It was in College Road, I can still remember it. And I'd gone there and I'd bought, it was a jam donut. And I'm walking down the road and I'm just shoveling it in my mouth. And I've got all jam dripping down my chin and sugar all over my mouth and all over the front of my coat. I remember it was autumn as well. And this bloke was walking towards me and he looked at me with disgust. I must have been about 17. He looked at me with disgust, because there I am just literally shoveling this jam donut with all the sugar and jam just spewing out. Looked at me with disgust. And I remember he looked at me, gave me a really weird look, and then he said, "You should wait until you get home before you eat that. But instead, go home and eat your dinner." I can still remember his words. I still see him. I still see his face. It just absolutely, yeah. I was stuffing the feelings down of impending doom, destruction, death, and being eaten by birds. And it wouldn't always stop there, because once I'd eaten these 2 cakes and I'd got halfway home, at the bottom of our road, round the corner and at the bottom of the next road, was some shops, and I would have to, more often than not, pass these shops to get home. And I would often go in there and buy sweets. So some of you may remember, if you're old enough, used to go in and buy like a quarter of sweets, a £quarter, or 2 ounces of sweets. And I would always buy like bonbons or pineapple crunches or stuff like cola cubes, things like that. And I'd always go in and I'd buy it like a quarter, never 2 ounces. 2 ounces was never enough because I'd like, oh yeah, I'm sharing them with my family and friends. So I'd buy them. Then I'd buy biscuits and I'd buy crisps. And I would hide them in my bag, in my ministry bag. And I would be stuffing as many of them in my mouth before I got home. And then when I got home, I would have my dinner. Then I'd go up to my room and I would be finishing the rest off. Just stuffing all of these feelings down. That was my MA. That was me. And in a weird, really weird kind of way, I looked forward to going out in the field ministry. That's probably why I became a pioneer. And it wasn't about knocking doors or speaking to people, because I do remember just going up to the doors and just tapping it really lightly so that the householder wouldn't hear. And then just after like 2 taps really lightly, I would walk away. We'd walk away. It's not like, when the delivery man comes and bang, bang, bang. Yeah, it wasn't like that. It was tap, tap, tap really quietly in the hope that they wouldn't hear. And then after 2 taps, we would go. And, what I enjoyed wasn't so much speaking to people at the door about Jehovah and the good news and the religion, but it was rather whoever it was I was working with, because we always worked in pairs and we'd always be having a good old natter and a good old chat. I looked forward to that part of it, and then finishing, and then on my way to stuff my face with the cakes and the sweets and the treats and the donuts and all of that. Always on my own when I did that. All of that behaviour contributed to increased weight gain. Now, bear in mind, I was always overweight from a child, a teenager, and now an adult. It was now snowballing. And again, I didn't make that connection until I started having therapy, started deconstructing and unraveling, and really going deep, and then the connections started to form. And now I'm going to share with you something else that's really deep and really personal, but it's for a video for another time. The Jehovah's Witnesses religion teaches that when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're in the ark, as it is, you're in safety, but there's danger out there, and if you ever leave, then bad things are going to happen. And the messaging that I got was that if I left, I was going to end up homeless, I was going to live on the streets, I was going to be a drug addict, I was going to be owned by a pimp who was going to abuse me and treat me terribly and pimp me out, and then I was going to die from this horrific, terrible, drug-related or sex-related disease. And that was the messaging that I was given. And again, all of that played on my mind. And I make that connection. I look back and I think that through therapy, I realise is why I've always struggled with relationships with men. And, I make great friends with men. I've got some wonderful friendships with men. But in the back of my head, that cult messaging is still there. And over the years, I've worked so hard to shut that down, because I know that certainly the men that I've dated and had relationships with, they've not been pimps, they've not abused me, they've not, plied me with drugs or beaten me. No, definitely not. But yeah, that little Jehovah's Witness voice is still there that says they're going to do that to you. So I've always struggled, and it's the trust issue that I've really struggled with. But that's a video for another time. But I raise that because, again, all of it has contributed to ruining my health and my weight gain. It was another level of fear. Another level of fear that made me want to hide and not be attractive to men. And therefore, by overeating and gaining weight, somehow I wouldn't be attractive to men. It's deep. Honestly, guys, it is so deep. It's really deep, and I'm really glad that, and it gets deeper, let me add, and I'm really glad that I'm at the stage in my journey, and I've had a lot of help through therapy, that I could now make these connections and start unraveling it. In the early 1990s, I escaped the religious organisation, and whilst I started on this journey of emotional mental freedom, the damage had been done. For the first 22 years, the damage was at full force, had been done, and it had taken residency in my body, in my nervous system, and in my psyche. And I continued, even after I escaped, I continued to eat. Still, because those feelings, just because I wasn't attending the Kingdom Hall doesn't mean that those issues had left me. Oh no, those issues were still plaguing me. They were in me, they were part of me. It was in my psyche, it was in here. And I continued to eat to suppress all of these feelings, to suppress the nightmares and the night terrors and the fears and all of those feelings that I wasn't good enough, and well, I'm going to die anyway, and Armageddon's going to come at any time, and I'm going to die. Because even though I'd left, I still for a while still believed the rhetoric. So I continued to eat, and whilst I was out on field service as a Jehovah's Witness, you'd think that I should be slim with all the walking. I wasn't. But now that I wasn't out walking in field ministry, I wasn't getting the exercise. So now the weight came on faster. And I continued to eat huge amounts of food. But I also started to consume alcohol. And when I was just thinking about this video today, it made me realise that I didn't drink alcohol at all. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not an alcoholic. Don't get me wrong. I do like a drink, as my friends will know. I like a rum and coke or a gin and tonic. And I only have it occasionally. I don't even have it weekly. Maybe I'd say on average maybe once a month or something. I'll have that. But back then I didn't drink at all. And it was only after leaving that I started to have a drink and started to enjoy drinks. But then I started to consume even more of the sugary stuff. I could get through a box of Bakewell tarts, a pack of 6 donuts, a pack of 12 crisps, a family size bag of crisps, just, in a day or two. I could easily get through that. And my weight started to increase. And what was happening, which I realise now, was I was suffering from mental and emotional trauma, but was using the food to suppress it. Now, growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, there was a very strong message that was out there in the community, and it discouraged people from seeking therapy and counselling, and I will challenge any Jehovah's Witness who say that that's not the case, because I strongly remember in my congregation the talks of it, that you don't go and see a counsellor or a therapist. What you need to do is go out on field service, study more and pray more, and God will sort it all out for you. That was the messaging. But, they couldn't stop you, but it was strongly discouraged, because, they will use hypnotherapy and the demons would get in, or they were going to abuse you sexually, or, they were going to change your mindset and you're going to end up being disfellowshipped. There was all this nonsense. It just wasn't encouraged. And if you did go, and I do remember somebody in the congregation who did end up going for therapy because she had serious mental health challenges. She was mentally ill, and she did go, and the messaging went out that she's spiritually weak, she's bad association, and what happened, she was soft shunned. So there was no announcement. There was a marking talk where they basically tell you, reiterate, that we shouldn't go for counselling, and beware of the dangers of it. So, and we all knew who they were referring to. So she was soft shunned. So we all knew she's not disfellowshipped, and we can't completely shut her off, but just soft shun her. Maybe don't talk to her as frequently, and don't invite her to any events or things like that. Soft shun, just keep your distance. All because she sought therapy and support for her health condition. So that was the messaging. And even though I left the Jehovah's Witness religion, that messaging still stayed with me, because I was still under the spell of the Watchtower. They still had controlled my mind even after leaving. So I didn't access any therapy. I didn't feel, I knew something wasn't right, because I was stuffing constantly for years, stuffing these, and oh my goodness, I tell you, when I mean stuffing, I'd eat like a biscuit with a cup of tea, but I couldn't stop at one. I'd eat 3 or 4, and then I'd put the packet away, and then 2 minutes later I'd be back in the kitchen and I'd have another 4 or 5, and then I was like, well, might as well finish the packet, and I could literally get through 1 pack of biscuit with a cup of tea. And then after dinner I could easily get through 3 or 4 bags of crisps, and then in the evening 4 or 5 cakes or a box of cake, easily. So I knew deep down that something was not right, but because I was always dissuaded and discouraged for going for counselling or therapy, just didn't even consider it as an option. Somebody put a message under one of my videos the other day when I was talking about leaving Jehovah's Witnesses, and they asked if I'd ever had any psychotherapy. No, I didn't go for it because of this issue. It was deeply discouraged, and and I'd say I'm not alone. I think that a lot of people who were Jehovah's Witnesses, or people who are Jehovah's Witnesses still now, do have a lot of mental and emotional and psychological challenges. They're just not dealing with it because it's frowned upon. So I didn't feel worthy to invest in me, in my health and my self-care. So it was at an all-time low from leaving the organisation. Now, there's another layer of complexity, if that wasn't bad enough. But one of the scariest things about being a Jehovah's Witness, especially when you have chronic health conditions, is the Jehovah's Witnesses' view on blood. And as a Jehovah's Witness, I was taught that blood is sacred, and you must abstain from it. And now, due to, again, the spell that is cast on its people and the mind control, I accepted their view of the blood doctrine without ever fully understanding or appreciating it. I was like, well, that's what it is. That's what Jehovah God has said. I trust what the organisation says. I've got to sign. I've got to, accept it. And the Jehovah's Witnesses interpret a couple of scriptures from the book of Leviticus and the book of Acts, where it does talk about blood, but it talks about abstaining from blood. And Jehovah's Witnesses has taken this and interpreted it to mean you can't have a blood transfusion. Even though the Bible was written thousands of years ago and blood transfusions is a modern day medical treatment. Let that sink in. At the time that I was a Jehovah's Witness, I had been diagnosed with anemia. I'd always suffered with anemia, again, for as long as I can remember. And at the time, I wasn't diagnosed with lupus, but I recognised, when I was diagnosed, I recognised I had a lot of the symptoms. I just hadn't been diagnosed. And I'd also been diagnosed with juvenile arthritis too. Now, lupus is a very difficult disease and illness to diagnose, and it's known as the master of disguise because it mimics so many other health conditions. And I was presenting with a wide variety of health conditions, but the GPs and doctors hadn't made that diagnosis because there were very particular markers for lupus. Now, one of the things that we do know is that lupus can cause severe anemia, and of course I was suffering with severe anemia, and later when I was diagnosed, the lupus affected and does affect my heart and my lungs and all my joints. And I think back now to the Jehovah's Witness blood doctrine and how, if I had needed it at the time, how it would have impacted my life. Because when I was finally diagnosed with lupus in the early 2000s, I was facing a potential blood transfusion because my anemia was, and my blood count was at rock bottom. So I was facing a blood transfusion. I didn't end up having it in the end, but it was definitely something that they were looking at giving me. And I remember feeling really scared, really petrified. That cult voice just popped up again because I was like, oh my goodness, that fear just overtook me because, again, of that indoctrination. I felt I was going to do something that was displeasing to God. But lying in that hospital bed, facing my own mortality, I was like, I've got a 10-year-old son. I've got a son. I'm a single parent. I ain't going to not have a blood transfusion. Even if it is going to displease God, even if that's what God says, I ain't doing that because I ain't leaving my son on this earth on his own. It ain't happening. Ain't happening. So in my mind, I was going through all of this in my mind, but it came to it that I didn't need the blood transfusion. I needed lots of other treatments, but didn't need the blood transfusion. And, again, when I was thinking through this video, I realised that in my congregation, there was a sister. She was also a pioneer, and she was diagnosed with lupus. She was diagnosed a few years before me. Well, she was diagnosed whilst I was still a Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then I was thinking of two other pioneer sisters. We used to call them sisters, brothers and sisters. And two other sisters in different neighbouring congregations that also was diagnosed with lupus. And as I was putting this video together, I just thought, now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I'm just going to drop that one there. But as a Jehovah's Witness, I had to carry a no blood card. And it's a sheet of paper, which is a legal document that you read and you sign. Yes, we sign it. And it's an advance decision document. And you sign it because in the event of a emergency, say, if I got hit by a bus, or, my anemia was at an all-time low and I needed, medical treatment, whatever the scenario was, if I needed medical treatment, if I was carrying that, and we had to carry it at all times with us, if I carried that with me and say, like, I didn't have family or friends with me, and somebody went through my belongings, they would see this no blood card and they would see that it was signed, and they knew then I could not accept a blood transfusion. I know. And it was the elders' responsibility to monitor regularly that all publishers, and publishers is when you're a baptised Jehovah's Witness, so there's no obligation to carry it if you're not baptised, but once you're baptised and you belong to them now, then you were obliged to sign it and to carry it, and if you didn't, there were consequences. So I had to sign it, and the elders would monitor. They would monitor that you had signed your blood card and that you were carrying it. And, it was to ensure that in an emergency, you weren't going to accept blood. Whether you were conscious or you were unconscious, that was your legal document to the medical team that no blood would be accepted by you. And I also remember being encouraged to speak to my medical practitioner. And I do you know what? I look back now and I just like cringe, absolutely cringe the things that I did. I was encouraged, we were all encouraged to go and speak to our medical practitioners and tell them that we were Jehovah's Witnesses and we didn't want blood in an emergency and we wanted it recorded in our medical notes. I don't know if that's the case today, but certainly when I was growing up back in the 70s and the 80s, that was definitely the case. And I remember being about 16, it was before I got baptised. I was so mind controlled, I was so underneath their spell that even before I was baptised, I made an appointment to go and see my doctor myself. I can still remember my doctor going along on my own to speak to my doctor, explaining that I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses and I don't want blood. And I remember arguing the toss with him, and trying to tell him that there was, oh God, I can still remember it. He must have thought, what an idiot, because I'm telling him that it's in the Bible about, something about the gladiators. I can't even remember. It was just so embarrassing. Something about the gladiators being thrown to the lions, and, that we're not allowed to have blood. I don't know where the gladiators come in, but I remember telling him this, and he was like, the Bible doesn't say that you can't have blood, and I was insistent that it did. And I remember getting out my Bible, and some of you may remember it, we'd gone from the green Bible, which was like one of the original New Welsh Translation Bible, then we went to the black Bible, and then, do you remember we had the mini black Bibles? I'm sure there was a red one somewhere along the line, but I remember taking out this mini red Bible and flicking through and showing him like the verses in Acts and Leviticus and saying, see there, it says you can't have blood, you can't have a blood transfusion. And I remember him looking at me and saying, it doesn't say that. And I can remember him, he just shook his head after I sat there arguing with him, like this 16-year-old arguing with this. He was near retirement as well. So, this 60-year-old medical practitioner who had nursed me from the day I was born, looked after me medically, me mum, me dad, me brothers and sisters, and the whole community. He'd looked after us all of these years, and there I was, wet behind the ears, telling him, no, I'm the blood transfusion. And I remember he sat there and he just shook his head, and he was like, okay. I remember literally he just did that, and he wrote it on my notes, no blood. And I remember thinking, I've stood up for Jehovah. And I've given the doctoral witness. And I remember going back to the meetings and telling the elders and the congregation, and again, loads of praise. Look at this fine young sister standing up for Jehovah. And I look back now and I just think, oh my goodness, I signed my death warrant. And luckily, it didn't come to that. But as someone who was living with the symptoms of lupus, the horrific symptoms of lupus, although I wasn't diagnosed, I had all the joint pains. Well, I'd had juvenile arthritis, I had anaemia, and I was suffering with all the horrific symptoms of lupus, although undiagnosed. And knowing that with anaemia and some of the conditions that I was later diagnosed with regarding my lupus, I may well have needed a blood transfusion. I could have had severe bleeding. I could have needed an operation. Just the thought that the refusal of blood, if I needed it back then, could have it would have forced the doctors to treat me without blood, complicating matters. And we know that unfortunately there are lots of believing Jehovah's Witnesses, and even some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who are still indoctrinated, need medical treatment and need blood transfusions and will still refuse it, and as a consequence they die. And I've had people in my congregation when I was Jehovah's Witness that died, people in neighbouring congregations who's died. In more recent years there've been really big news articles in my local paper of people who have died because they refused blood transfusions. So, I think to myself, I could have been in that situation, but since leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, since escaping, I know that they, because of all the legal claims that they've had, they have kind of like slightly changed their stance on blood. And what they're saying is that you can have bloodless alternatives. And now, more recently, they're saying you can have blood fractions. So essentially what they're saying is you can have the burger bun, you can have the lettuce, you can have the tomato, you can have the burger, you can have the cheese, but you can't have it all together in a burger sandwich. I'll leave that one with you. But yeah, the blood issue, it's a big one, it's a deep one. It's a deep one for me because of how close I came to it, but that's a topic for another video, guys. And whilst these advances, and whilst these have advanced, you know, the blood fractions and, you know, the bloodless treatments, they're not always sufficient in a trauma or a rapid decline situation where, you know, blood would be given as in an emergency. So, you know, I think about the mental strain of all of that. You know, you're sick, you're already sick, you're sick from childhood, you know, you're suffering emotionally, mentally, psychologically, you're abusing your body by stuffing food and alcohol down it just to dampen those feelings, just to get through the day, to get through the nights and the trauma and the nightmare and the horrific flashbacks, the PTSD. You getting through all of that. You've escaped this organisation. You're sick. You're getting through all of that. You're sick. And now you're forced to carry a legal document that is your death warrant in the event that you have an emergency and you need to have blood. It's a lot. It's a lot. But now that I have escaped the organisation, I'm unravelling, deconstructing. Some things I deconstructed quicker from, and the blood issue was one of those that I deconstructed quicker from, because to me it just didn't make sense. It was nonsense. And when I read those Bible scriptures, I could not see, you know, the massive leap. There was just no leap. There just wasn't a leap. You know, there was just no connection to those scriptures from abstaining to blood to refusing a blood transfusion. There was something sinister in that blood doctrine, something very, very sinister that I didn't accept. So it was easier for me to unravel and deconstruct from that. But as I say, that's a topic for another time, for another video. But since I removed that death sentence and started focusing on my healing from the religion as a whole, I know that today I can accept any medical treatment that I've discussed with my medical practitioners that is necessary for me to stay alive, for my health, my well-being, and to be here for my son and my grandsons and, you know, my friends and my family. And that's what freedom does. That's what being free of the Jehovah's Witness cult That's what being free of the Jehovah's Witness religion does. It frees you. Yeah, frees you from that thinking. And now I know that if I need help, I can take it. If I need mental, emotional, psychological help, I can access support and I can take it without the bad thinking that something bad's going to happen to me. If I need a medical intervention that requires blood or any medical intervention, I'm not afraid of taking it because, you know, I mean, I have had a lot of health issues and I've always trusted my medical practitioners, always. And we always discuss treatment, and 9 out of 10 times the treatment has been right for me. And there's some things that I've gone back and I'm like, I'm not so sure about this, and they've looked at alternatives, and yeah, but we come to that together, that decision together. And I'm glad that I'm in a position now where I can do that. Whereas prior, I couldn't do that. I was barred from doing that. And now that I've freed myself from the spell of the Jehovah's Witnesses, I've been able to chip away at the roots of my weight problem. I've exposed the root of my weight problem. I've shone a spotlight on the root of my weight problem, right back to that doomsday messaging, right from when I was in as a child, sitting on those cold, hard and uncomfortable chairs in the Kingdom Hall. That's where it started. That's where it started. And I've been able to start to unpick all of that bit by bit, gradually, over time, and replace it with things that are good for me. So instead of that negative messaging about death and doom, I'm speaking life into my future. I'm looking forward to things that I want to do, experiences I want to enjoy. I'm making new friendships and new relationships and dampening those voices, that cult voice, which unfortunately is still there a little bit, and I'm working on it, but dampening that voice, quietening that voice. You know, I still enjoy sweets and treats, but now I'm enjoying healthy food options. I've gone back to enjoying, well, I'm making time actually now to think about the foods that I'm going to have, to plan them, to go and shop for them and to cook them and enjoy them with my family and friends. Whereas when I was Jehovah's Witness, didn't have time to do that. Didn't have time to think about that. So it was always like food on the go. So, you know, that is now changed. But I'm also replacing all of those negative thoughts, negative fears with positivity, with affirmative action, with reading really good books that inspire me, that lift me, that educate me. And I'm on end of last year, 2025, I started reading the Bible. And I'm on this journey again now. I've started reading the Bible again, but at a much slower pace, with view of really exploring my faith, and rather exploring how I feel about God and Jesus, and getting to know Him and developing my faith, because I really feel that was robbed from me as a Jehovah's Witness. And I'm also now focusing on me and my self-care. And I still have health issues, but I'm in a much better, a much different place than I was years ago. So my channel, A Time Out with Angela, is all about reclaiming health and life. And if you're new here, then a huge thank you for being here and watching. I really appreciate you. And feel free to have a little look at my back catalogue videos. A lot of it is about lifestyle, my weight loss journey, my shopping hauls, food hauls, cooking, gardening, travel, all of those things that I've reclaimed since deconstructing from being a Jehovah's Witness and reclaiming my life back. So thank you so much for being here. So today I'm 12.5 stone lighter. My blood sugars, because I'm type 2 diabetic, is under control. My lupus is, I still have problems with it, but for now it's pretty stable. I do have other issues such as osteoarthritis, Raynaud's, bursitis, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, lots and lots of other health conditions, again all because of that attack on my nervous system. But I'm learning to cope with it. I'm learning to manage those conditions and to still enjoy my life and have lots of wonderful experiences and focusing in on the positives. Now, if you're watching this, if you're still with me at this point, thank you, I appreciate you. And if you feel trapped, whether it's religion, maybe it's a bad relationship, or, you know, just a negative mindset, please know that your health and your life are worth it. And it's okay, it's absolutely okay to take time out and to choose you. Do things for you because you are worth it. Guys, thank you so much for letting me share this part of my story and my journey with you. It wasn't easy, but it's the truth. It's my truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments. Have you ever felt that you've been in or have you ever been in an environment that made you feel physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically sick? It could be in a relationship, could be a job, could be as part of a friendship group or community. Do drop a comment and let me know. Let's talk about it. Guys, please feel free to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell if you want to see more of my journey. And thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.